Okay, I'm going to give a short presentation on how to present to scientific peers. I'm only recently out of a PhD myself, so I'm not much more advanced than a lot of people that I'm speaking to today. But I've called this talk Scientists are People Too, because the main point that I wanted to make is that just like other people, you need to tailor your talk to the right audience. Scientists can get bored. And basically, a lot of the rules of presenting generally still apply when presenting to scientists. Okay, so the main points in this talk is that many scientists are actually lay people in your area of expertise. We end up getting so specialized that it's really important to know your audience and tailor your talk to them. Scientists can also get bored, no matter, you can have the best talk in the world about Ordovician trilobites, and even some subject matter experts in your area might get bored if you don't catch their attention. The third main point is that the importance of practice. I've called this scientists want their lunch, and you'll see why at the end. So basically, yeah, rules of presenting to a general audience still apply, and you still need to keep your audience engaged. So we'll start off with knowing your audience. I'd just like everyone to picture the scene. This is a photo from a geochemistry conference, Goldschmidt 2017, that I just pulled off the internet. And it's a fairly typical view of what a session at one of these conferences looks like. And there'll be a bunch of different people in the room for your presentation. Not all of them will necessarily be as interested, as engaged as you hope. So guy with the microphone here is the really aggressive, eager professor who's asking questions after every single talk. He's the big man, he's a subject matter expert, and he's disagreeing with everyone. At the front here is a hungover guy who just came in because the room was dark and it's a nice place to sort of doze off his hangover. Might be someone working away at their laptop and they've just looked for a nice, quiet, like relatively undisturbed place to finish the presentation. It's not always places to sit outside the session room, so sometimes people will just be sat in there in your talk, not listening at all. There might be some people who are genuinely interested in what you have to say and have specifically picked out your talk and come here because they saw the title, they saw the abstract, they're really interested. And there's others who might just be killing time before the keynote presentation, and your talk is just a way for them to while away the time. So bearing in mind that your audience will have these varying levels of interest and expertise, it's really important to make your talk accessible, even when you're speaking to scientists in your field. A lot of PhD students might not think this. I know that imposter syndrome is relatively common, and you might doubt it, but you are the world expert in your specific area of PhD research. Everyone gets so specialized, and particularly by the end of your PhD, you will know more about it than anyone else, more than your supervisor, about your specific set of samples, your specific area of research. So don't assume that everyone in the room knows what you're talking about. It's really important in this regard to avoid acronyms wherever you can. If you really have to use them or something that's going to come up a lot, then define it wherever necessary. Minimize the jargon, just try and keep it at a base level that all scientists within your field will know. And it's also quite important, especially at major conferences, to spend more time on the introduction to your talk and less on the methods, results, and discussion. You might have had the most incredible novel method or some fantastic results that you want to talk about, but unless you define the problem and introduce it well, then no one's going to really grasp the significance of it. It's also important to adjust your presentation style to the audience or the type of conference that you're presenting at. So I've split this into major conference and specialized conference. When I say major conference, this might be like a broad, for example, geochemistry conference like Goldschmidt, or a geology general conference like AGU or EGU, or this could be something like a student symposium at a particular department where you're hearing talks from a range of different disciplines. So in your audience, in this case, you're going to have a mix of experts in the specific field and non-experts, scientists who are experts in their own field, but not in yours. In general, you're going to have shorter presentations, and really the purpose of these is to advertise your research. You don't want to go too heavy on the details, but basically put your research out there and try and get the audience to look up your paper, to follow up these details later if necessary. On the right is a specialized conference. This might be something like a society organized conference, or sometimes you get conferences that are organized to put together a special volume of a journal. And in these, you'll tend to have a more expert audience. They're all interested in the particular narrow field of science that you're talking about. So there should be a better common base of understanding. This means that you might be able to ease back on the introduction a bit and start speaking at a higher level. You probably don't need to go from, so build it from the ground up. You might have longer presentations in these kind of conferences. It could be up to 30 minutes, maybe longer for keynotes and so on. And you can go into more detail in your presentation to allow discussion after the talks. So I think in this case, it is more acceptable to use jargon or acronyms, but again, don't go crazy. It can make your presentation clunky and hard to follow. The second main point is that scientists, just like regular people, get bored. So it's important to make your presentation catchy. Again, the general rules of presenting still apply. I'm not going to go too much into depth in this, but you have to think about your body language. If you want the audience to listen to you, then look at them. If you want them to pay attention to something that's on your slides, turn your body, look at the slides, use a laser pointer if you have it, and this will help the audience focus on your images. Whatever you do, don't stare at your notes. And I'll get into this later, but you should be well enough practiced that you don't have to read off notes as you present. It's really important to be excited and passionate about your subject, because if you don't care about it, then why should you expect anyone else to? I just put this slide to demonstrate an absolute no-no, because at this point, half of you will be trying to read this dense wall of text that I've put on the slide, and the other half will be trying to listen to what I'm saying, and you'll probably completely turned off by the end of it. So just really try and avoid dense chunks of text, avoid complete sentences. You want to keep things into punchy, short bullet points. And I think by putting less text, you can actually get more information across to your audience. So yeah, use bullet points, keep them short, fill in the details of what you're saying. And in general, using pictures or visual aids is better than text. In some cases, you can just have a slide which is just an image and talk about it. And this will really help the audience focus on it. Images stick in your head better, and hopefully some of you recognize the stonks meme, and this will, give you a bit of a laugh and make you remember this a bit better. It's important to recognize that presentations are not just a verbal form of a paper. So images that work in a paper might not work at all in a presentation. This monstrosity on the right is from one of my own papers, and it's debatable whether this should even be included in a paper because there's so much information in it. But particularly in a presentation, the audience is just going to look at that and they're going to take nothing from it because there's just too much going on, and the text and the symbols ends up being very small and hard to read. So be selective, pick out the most important parts of the figures that you want to show, the bits that really illustrate your argument and your point. And you may need to make new figures for a talk. This can be as simple as, in this case, all I did is crop out a figure, and because they had a shared x-axis, I just bumped up the title and grouped them in PowerPoint. It took like 2 minutes. But here we're getting way more information across. In this case, for the geochemists out there, it's a plot of europium anomaly against magnesium oxide, and you can see there's a correlation, which means there's pelagic place fractionating. But you can't see that at all in the original slide with all the other figures. Just a personal pet peeve of mine is I'm not a big fan of people showing pictures of titles of papers from their own work. I think the problem with this is similar to the big wall of text, is there's too much information going on. And for the audience watching, they really can't get all the details of this paper down. So if you want to direct the audience to a paper, then just write the title and just enough information for people to find it. Often at major conferences, you won't be distributing the slides, and people aren't allowed to record it. So these kind of things won't be very useful for people trying to find the information later. If you are distributing your slides, then you can maybe put a bit more information. You could include a DOI or something like that so that people can quickly find your paper online afterwards. And the third point here is that scientists get hungry. So it's really important to practice your presentation and get your timing right. Worst thing you can do is run over and keep people longer than they should be. So I'm going to take you all back to Goldschmidt, which is an international geochemistry conference back in 2016. And I was a young, impressionable PhD student. It was my first major international conference. I wasn't quite this young as the picture, but you get the idea. Very earnest, very keen, no idea what I'm doing. And in my session, both the keynote speaker and the next speaker, who were very well-known reputable scientists, both went over their time slots. So by the time my talk was supposed to start at 12:15, it was delayed by about 10 minutes. Started at 12:25. Everyone's hungry, room's warm, people are grumpy. Now, I think there's two types of people in general when it comes to public speaking. People who get nervous and do an intense amount of practice and have the presentation really, really rehearsed, and people who get nervous and try not to think about it and avoid practicing. I'm definitely the second type of person. I've been trying to force myself to practice more before presenting. But in 2016, I hadn't practiced my talk in 5 minutes over time. I was the only thing standing between a room full of hungry scientists and their lunch breaks. Everyone was pretty pissed off. Just don't be that guy, don't be me. Practice your talk. So when it comes to practicing, it's really important to get a feel for what your typical time per slide is. A lot of people use the general rule of 1 minute per slide. For me personally, it tends to be a bit longer when I'm talking about science because I ramble a bit. And really, if your talk does come out too long when you practice it, the only way to fix this is to remove slides. You can't just try and talk faster to compensate. This is the same thing of you're giving more information, but less is going to get into your audience's heads. On that note, probably go easy on the coffee before you present because that can make people talk 100 miles an hour and that's not very helpful. So I genuinely think that short talks are harder than longer talks. It's really an art just trying to focus down the most important bits of information from your paper, your thesis, your study, to get it across to an audience and get them to retain the most important bits. In general, it's better to go under your time limit than over. At a typical conference talk where it's 12 or 15 minutes, if you finish early, then you might actually get some time for questions and answers with your audience. And that again will help your talk stick in their minds if people feel like they can have more of an interactive experience with it. Practicing your talk can also help you with looking away from your slides and engaging the audience. Again, look at the audience and they will look at you. So just to summarize, when you're presenting to scientists, the rules of presenting to a general audience still apply. It's really important to know your audience, to make your talk catchy, and to practice a lot. Okay, that's all I have to say.